is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Welcome back to the Morning Run. You're here with Lynn, Roshan and Noel. We are turning our attention to the hospitality sector because under the National Recovery Plan announced on Tuesday, a full reopening of the economy is projected when 60% of the population is fully vaccinated and the daily number of new cases falls below 500. The government estimates the earliest this could happen is the fourth quarter of 2021.
Yeah, so that is small comfort for the tourism and hospitality industries, which are among the hardest hit by the lockdown and will be among the last sectors to fully reopen. So after 15 months of barely surviving, will the prolonged lockdown mean the end of even more hotels and businesses that rely on this trade?
Joining us on the line to discuss the outlook for the hotel industry is Yap Lip Seng, CEO of the Malaysian Association of Hotels. Lip Seng, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, the National Recovery Plan projects that the social sector and interstate travel will only recommence in Phase 4, which at the earliest would be in October. What's the reaction in the hotel industry been like to this plan?
Good morning. Well, there are a couple of ways to look at it, and on the positive side, if you choose to look at the positive side, at least for now, we know there is a roadmap. At least we know when and what to expect now, which leaves us with a bigger question of what do we do now? Now that we have this piece of information, what are we going to do about it? If we know clearly that we are not expecting any business until year end, what should we do? How long more can we sustain? Do we have any other options or should we just close? And the same questions we want to pose to the government. What do you want us to do now? Are we to remain open and sustain losses every day, every hour, and every minute? Is the government going to provide us more financial support or any assistance, or are we on our own again? We need the government to tell us this now. What do we do now?
So, Lip Seng, it's really just not the greatest situation to be in at this point. And this timeline, I think, has really struck a chord with many people, thinking that basically business will be shut till December. But one thing that's a topic that's come up time and time again over the last 15 months is hotels looking for a diversification of revenues. How has that been? And is that something that needs to be focused on the next few months, I guess, now that a timeline has, I guess, been more entrenched here?
That's the problem with the current lockdown. There's only so much we can do. Without even dine-in options, hotels are caught in a very difficult situation. The only option here, and this is only possible for a small number of hotels, is to apply to be a quarantine center or low-risk treatment center for symptomatic patients or even those with mild symptoms. Other than those that are operating as quarantine centers, hotels are forced to cut expenses because there's no other means of revenue. There are no other channels to make any more money. So we can only cut costs to survive, which includes trimming of manpower. In a recent survey that we conducted, almost 28% of hotels responded that they have cut more than half of their manpower already by now. And 63% are placing their employees on unpaid leave, while 45% admitted to have initiated a direct pay cut on their employees. And this means hotels are actually taking more than one cost-cutting measure at the same time, which means on a worst-case scenario, an employee could be getting a pay cut and at the same time being placed on unpaid leave and also have his benefits reduced. So it is really, really bad.
I mean, at one point, Lip Seng, MAH was in favour of a stricter lockdown in order to curb the spread of cases and bring the numbers under control. Did you envision, though, that the shutdown could last until the end of the year?
No, and at this stage, I don't think anyone can predict anything anymore. Even the number of cases reported now is not showing an actual trend of increase or decrease, but it is still highly dependent on the number of tests that are being selectively conducted. When we suggested a full lockdown, we expected it to be a full-fledged lockdown with minimal activities, and we said this then, that at the same time, the government initiated mass testing nationwide, take advantage of the lockdown to isolate as many positive cases as possible, especially the asymptomatic ones. That is the only way we can get it done quickly and efficiently. But it looks like now we're neither here or there. There's no clear strategy to break the chain of spread tactically, and it almost feels like we are just hoping for cases to drop and then relax the SOPs, only to trigger another spread. If we do not change our strategies, this will be never ending.
And what strategy do you hope the government will take, and how should it support the hotel industry in a most realistic manner?
At the moment, we have not seen any additional support from the government, especially to the hospitality and the tourism industry. But here's the trick. Despite all the predicaments, we see a silver lining in the National Recovery Plan. it should allow the government to introduce better and more targeted assistance packages for sectors that can be identified now as unable to sustain on its own. The tourism and hotel sector in particular, we need extended wage subsidy at least till year end. The current wage subsidy program will end in July. And we have always been asking for a higher rate of 50% for those earning up to 4,000 and 30% of those earning from 4,000 to 8,000. This is a model that works in other countries and it will work in Malaysia as well. We need the government to do this. But of course, to survive till year end, we also need more financial assistance in terms of utilities, a 50% discount on electricity, which is nothing for Tenaga Nasional, and water as well as sewage, along with other relaxation of other statutory payments such as licenses, taxes, EPF, SOSO, EIS, Human Resources Development Corporation, and so on. And one of the key points that we have raised with other many trade associations as well, banks need to step up. They need to take the initiative now to help the people of the industry. It is the moral obligation to extend interest moratoriums to all of us. Only yesterday we saw a report that banks are confident on a profit recovery. The rest of the world are talking about we are still in the red. We can only dream of a break even, and they are talking about profit recovery. They must step up now and give us all the interest-free moratoriums.
Lip Seng, earlier you mentioned the hotel quarantine program. What can you tell us about that in the sense of how many hotels are participating and what kind of capacity is needed for that?
At the moment, I think we have about over 50 hotels across the country that are serving as quarantine centers, and a handful of them are serving as low-risk treatment centers for those who are positive and asymptomatic ones especially. But with the current lockdown, the only way out, the possibility to generate any hotel income is actually through these programs. But like I said earlier, it's limited number of hotels because the demand is insufficient. Demand for quarantine is not that high. And we don't want it to be that high as well. If the demand is higher, means the cases are higher. But this is also reasonable because for control purposes, that hotel needs to have a certain number of rooms. And the layout must be, layout for logistic purposes must be within the requirements of a quarantine hotel. And yes, we have asked the government to expand the use of these hotels. And this will also lighten the burden on public health care and hospitals. Our state chapters, the association, we have chapters across the country, are also talking to respective states to allow this. And many of the states actually want to do this because it's a win-win arrangement. At the same time, they can help the hotel. At the same time, they can help the hospitals. So there are a handful of hotels, like I said earlier. And we hope to see more coming in the coming weeks or coming months to allow patients an option. They can choose if they want to stay in the standard quarantine centers or if they want to pay a little bit more so that they can stay in a hotel for the quarantine. I think we need to push this further.
Lip Seng, very quickly, we've got about a minute left. Are hotels able to participate in PICAS, the public-private immunization program?
No, the PICAS program is not offered to hotels, but hotels are, however, being prioritized through the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture. We have assisted the Ministry of registering hotel workers. We sent in about 30,000 names, and we were informed that the government had made allocation for hotel and tourism workers. MOTAC had also made a press statement earlier that a priority order will commence with hotels serving as quarantine centers, and then the other hotels that are still operating. We have been informed that some of the quarantine hotels are already being called for vaccination, but we have yet to see a full-fledged implementation at this point. We have also sought for venues for vaccination in most of the states to support the government's initiative, but I'm guessing that the entire initiative will be dependent on the supply of vaccine.
Lip Seng, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That was Yap Lip Seng, CEO of the Malaysian Association of Hotels, giving us a picture of how the hotel industry is faring right now. And I guess the answer to that is not particularly well. No outlook yet either on whether or not the government will be offering further assistance, which of course the MAH is calling for if hotels are to survive until the end of the year. BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9.